Samantha Nichols is the Executive Director of the Organ Donor Foundation, and she's joining us on the line to speak about the 4,300 South Africans who are waiting transplants. Samantha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
Now, that number is extraordinary, 4,300 people waiting. Tell us a bit about the South African context.
Well, basically, the 4,300 are the lucky ones that make it onto the waiting list for an organ transplant. In South Africa, there are thousands more who potentially could go onto the waiting list. As an example, dialysis machines in the state sector are very limited. So people are literally sent home to die if they cannot be placed on a dialysis machine and placed on the waiting list for a kidney transplant. So there's a dire need for more people to become organ donors.
The saddening thing about this, Samantha, is it's not as though they're waiting for a resource that isn't available. There are so many South Africans who simply aren't registered, and often some of these concerns expressed by these South Africans have got to do with cultural reasons or simply misinformation. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, often when we speak to people, we always, often it comes up, are their cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, and yes, that is a problem. But actually the biggest problem is lack of education and understanding. That's the sort of first point of call, because if you talk to people, they will often say to you, oh, I've always wanted to do it, I just didn't know how. So, they thought it was a complicated procedure, they thought you had to undergo medical tests, and it's really just a very simple thing to indicate your wish, sign up as an organ donor, and tell your family, and leave the rest up to the medical professionals to decide. Some of the concerns that we do have around religion and culture, we've started discussions with traditional healers and cultural leaders. And, they often say the beliefs that there are, the misconceptions, they aren't actually true. What they say is that they simply just do not know what organ donation is.
So in the most simple terms, what would being an organ donor involve?
Well, an organ donor is someone who can potentially donate their heart, their lungs, their liver, their kidneys, and their pancreas. So those are the solid organs. And you would need to be brain dead on a ventilator in a hospital. So it would be someone who would have died a traumatic death, a car accident, or something along those lines where they land up in hospital. But you can also donate your tissue. Your tissue is your heart valves, your corneas, your skin, and your bone. And that can be used normally 12 to 72 hours after death. So even if you can't be a solid organ donor, you can still be a tissue donor, and you can improve the quality of life of up to 50 people. So it's really a miraculous thing to be an organ and tissue donor.
Now, here at News 24 Live, we were really so fortunate to have known Jenna Lowe for a very short amount of time. We interviewed her about her extraordinary campaigns, and that was a young woman who really lived to have more people sign up as organ donors. Now, won't you tell us a little bit about Jenna? And as we understand it, we saw a spike in organ donors through Jenna's Get Me to 21 campaign.
Time that the campaign ran, we sort of measured it from October to the early New Year. We saw about 17,000 people register as organ donors from combined campaigns, ours and theirs. So there was a tremendous increase, and unfortunately, in the week that she died, or the month that she died, we saw a tremendous increase as well, a spike in the number of people. So she definitely, touched many people's hearts and encouraged many people. I think it's only, you can only mention numbers so many times and say 4,300, but if you show someone that's waiting for a transplant, I think then it really hits home, especially someone as young as her, who has a whole life ahead of her. That really does motivate people to become organ donors.
I'm embarrassed to admit that it was only after I interviewed Jenna did I realize that I wasn't an organ donor. And the process was so quick and so simple, which is why I say I'm so embarrassed that I hadn't done it before. It didn't even take 5 minutes in an online form. So to the viewer who's watching this who believes that it's a complicated process they simply don't have time for, won't you set the record straight?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, it's easy. Literally, I think our form has shortened since the last time we had the registration process. We now literally ask for, I think, about 5 details, and you get emailed a login, username, and password, and you can update the rest of your information. It costs nothing, literally takes a minute of your time, and so simple. There's no test that you need to undergo now. All you need to do is make a decision. We will send you your information pack in the post with your organ donor card, and then discuss the decision with your family. That is very, very important, because ultimately your family will need to give consent at the time of your death.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, because in the South African context, you may decide that you do want to be an organ donor, but explaining that decision to your family is very, very important, because ultimately, like you said, they'll be making the decision once you pass on.
Yes, very important. So in South Africa, our organization is the awareness organization. Just to clarify, because a lot of people don't understand, they think that our organization will literally go off, remove the organs, and so we're involved with allocation and procurement, which we're not. We're only an awareness organization creating awareness around the need. So the transplant coordinators and the medical professionals who approach the family will always ask for signed consent. And we can't stress it enough that people have to talk to their family about it, because if you have a loved one that has passed away in a traumatic accident, it's such a traumatizing time, and you don't want to have to think, were they had they decided to become an organ donor, had they signed up. So it's really just about discussing it, making your family aware, and besides that, you're spreading the word amongst your family and friends. So hopefully encouraging more people to become organ donors through your actions.
Are you able to give us an indication of how many South Africans are currently organ donors?
Our database is currently about 3.5 to 4 years old. It's relatively new. In the past, the Organ Donor Foundation never had a database, just for the simple reason that it was a discussion between the family, and education was created around the subject. But currently, we have about 160,000 registered organ donors. So that's over the past 3 or 4 years that we've signed up. But we know many more people have indicated their wish, because you'll hear on Facebook and other media platforms, people will say, well, I signed up 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and they ask for a new information pack. So we know that probably a few 100,000 people who know about organ donation, but are not necessarily on our register.
How can we find out more information, and can we interact with you via social networks, or for the viewer who's got questions and they'd really like an answer to it?
Absolutely. So we've got a website. Our website is odf.org.za. We've got a toll-free line, which is 0800 226611. We've got a Facebook page and a Twitter account. Our Facebook page is Organ Donor Foundation of SA. We've got quite a big following, which we're very proud of on Facebook. And then we've also got a Mobi site, which we recently launched, as well as an app on Google Play Store. So you can find us on various platforms to interact with us.
Samantha Nichols, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thank you so much.